Welcome to Visionaries, where we explore stories, strategies, and insights from the world's most inspiring entrepreneurs, brands, and creators. We're on a mission to help visionaries like you stand out and monetize their knowledge, influence, and message online, exploring topics like business, marketing, creativity, and personal development. Let's build your vision for a happier, more meaningful life, business, and community together. Walter Hill Jr. joins us on Visionaries today, where we talk about his entrepreneurial journey from young startup founder to longtime business leader, mentor, author, and so much more. In fact, Walter shares his unique red flag framework and how you can use it inside of your own business and life. When it comes to owning a business, your stomach and your mind is often filled with either lots of excitement or just bottomless fear. What if I make the wrong decisions? What if my business completely falls apart? Well, what if you had a tested and proven strategy to help navigate the uncertainties of running a business? What if you could have the tools to ensure your business's financial success? Well, we explore some of these ideas and more inside of this interview with Walter today. And he shares more about his book and the red flag strategy that enables entrepreneurs everywhere to turn their businesses into top competitors and thrive in the business world today. So let's jump into our interview with Walter Hill Jr. Welcome back to Visionaries. Today we have on Walter Hill. Walter, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Of course, of course. Well, for those who are learning about you for the first time, give us a nice introduction to who you are and what you're up to.
Well, I'm a second generation entrepreneur, and I'm trying to give a kind of a brief answer to this question. Because,
do you have a couple hours? Yeah.
I've had a few years, so there's a lot that I could say about that. I was a second generation entrepreneur. My father was a small business owner, and I started working with him at the age of 10, where I got my first introduction to what it was like to provide service and be compensated for it, and the importance of good service so that you had an opportunity to have develop repeat customers. That is something that resonated with me very early. And after leaving the University of Maryland, after that, I went to move to California and worked my way out for about 3 months and started to establish myself in Los Angeles. And I have been here ever since. I started my first business at 24 years old, and I'm quite a ways from that right now. So that's a long time ago, but I still have very vivid, clear memories of what it was like. It was a lot of fun. For some reason, there were people at the time that gave a lot of trust to a 24-year-old. And I had 2 floors of offices on Wilshire Boulevard, which was considered a very prestige area. I didn't know that at the time because I was from Virginia. I had no idea where I was. So these very kind landlords actually rented me the space, and I was in business. And that was kind of my first experience with the importance of balance, because I was married at the time, and it was my first experience with making a lot of money. And it was so exciting that I would just work all day and didn't pay very much attention to family. And the end of that story. As a result of that, by 25 years old, I was divorced. And that was a great lesson about the importance of life balance, of directing your energies to be successful, but at the same time, not neglecting other things that are important, very important in life. Because I think to have a successful career, It needs to be successful overall, successful family life, successful business life, and that's what leads to a happy end. And that's where I am now. I sold my company about 3 years ago, and I consider it not retired because I'm still very active and trying to share as much of what I learned with others. And that's why I wrote the book, Think Red Flags, um, a proactive and profitable approach for your small business.
Yes, that's thank you so much for walking through this. And
Yeah,
I love getting context to people's background
yeah.
into business, but also into like why you were guided to do what you're doing right now.
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit more about this book and some of the messages that people can pull from it and how it can be relevant to them.
Well, what I hope they will get from it is a process that I refer to as red flagging. It's a very common term, red flagging. We learn it from childhood. You walk to a corner, it's a red flag moment. You have to look both ways before you cross the street or there's danger. It simply means caution, beware, be on the lookout for. And so red flags in business would apply in the same way. If there are, as you probably know, some uh, 45% of most businesses fail within the first 5 years. The good news is 55% of the business succeed. So I think what most people um, uh, want to pursue is how can they increase the odds to their favor so that they can finish in the 55% as opposed to the 45% that didn't make it. And the way you do that is one of the ways you do it. There is no magic answer because uh, I think that the red flagging is a way of thinking, and it can be a tremendous asset to anyone who would develop that skill. And how do you do that? By reading about it, or having a coach that would teach it, as I did to all the members of my team, which is why we had a company that had less than 1% error rate, and we were in a very volatile business of printing. We printed overseas. We did a lot of importing from Taiwan and China and India, and that requires a tremendous skill for red flagging, projecting ahead in a project, and being able to see where the areas are that if you don't get those particular points right, your project will fail. And the same thing applies with a company. If you have a business and the business is based on a product strategy or a service strategy, if you don't take the time to really validate the product or the service so that you know the words that are described in your mission statement is something that you can actually execute and do, then you have overlooked your first red flag. And I wrote about that because in my experience over the years, I have seen many, many entrepreneurs start businesses with a great idea on paper. And it appeared that it was as simple, a simple thing to execute. And they move far along with it, spend a lot of money and time on it, and find out that the product doesn't do exactly what they described, or the service can't be delivered as they thought, because they failed to think through some of the details. Now, uh, what I don't encourage is analysis paralysis for business owners. You really do have to get in there and just start punching away and make things happen. But there are some things that can be catastrophic, and small businesses lose millions of dollars every year uh, on predictable errors, things that they didn't have to necessarily problem areas, mistakes, I'm sorry, that they didn't necessarily have to make. So um, all of that mistakes erodes your profit margin. And as you know, uh, Dallin, The name of the game is profit. If you make enough profit, when you finally get to a point that you make a mistake that you could not foresee, you usually have enough capital reserve to cover it. But you can't just make mistakes and then the same mistakes and then repeat those mistakes, so that when something happens that is really impossible to anticipate, and I can tell you that, something like a pandemic, I don't think I would ever imply that someone was smart enough to predict this pandemic. I've lived 77 years here in the United States. I've never lived through a pandemic before. So that's a first. I mean, we've had issues with flus and things like that, but nothing like this. So to say that you should be able to project ahead and anticipate that would be an overstatement. I wouldn't make that statement because that's just not true.
Yeah.
But what it does is, if you are prepared and you have been profitable because of your efficiency, then you're going to have a better chance of getting through those times. And that's why I tried to put as many of those thoughts as far as how you develop the red flag thinking process. That's why I wrote about it in the book, to really hopefully help others use this process as it helped us.
Yeah. This sounds so powerful. And to me, speaking as an entrepreneur myself,
Yeah.
So much what you're saying resonates. And I know for those listening or watching will feel the same, because as an entrepreneur or small business owner, all we want to do is succeed, right? Because it's our
Absolutely.
livelihood.
Absolutely.
It's our team's livelihood. And so to recognize those red flag moments, or those, and I'm sure with that, right, there's that iceberg element that there may be something that's on the surface, but much more under the surface to dig deeper into. And I imagine your book explores how to uncover a lot of these red flags and then fix them.
Yes.
Yeah.
We hope to encourage a way of thinking that you can pass on to your team, as we did. It was common term in our company that one of our administrators working on something that's coming from Taiwan, and they'd see something in the order and they'd say, well, that's a red flag. I mean, everyone said, oh, that's a red flag. So what they do is you can develop some procedures and processes, but you first have to identify the problem before you can have a process to cover it. So they could do that, and then we would develop a process to cover something that would repeat every time in the same type of order. But the way of thinking is important because you can't document the entire process. You can't document everything you should look out for. That's an instinct, that's an intuition. And it was taught in our company of how to identify those red flags, so that all of the important steps in a process to deliver an order, and also the steps in a process to have a successful business, because it applies to, the entire company and a particular project within a company, because it's a thought process. It's not step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's how we think, how we look at it. And it's very common. And most people, once they understand it, if the light bulb comes on, they do it naturally. It's not something they have to go back to the manual to check for. They just do it manually because they can tell. Let's see, I've had an experience in the past with a Chinese supplier where I understand that they speak English, the people we're dealing with, but it's a second language. It's not a first language, it's a second language. So sometimes the descriptions that I'm giving them may not resonate. So I better check that so that I don't get $200,000 worth of goods coming into the port and get a surprise because it's not what I expected. So I will put some extra caution. It's a flag. I caution, and I make sure it's clear, so that the person that has to prepare these goods for us is clear on what they need to do. That is a huge problem, in my industry. So
Well, not just your industry. What it sounds like you're talking about is clarity of communication, of
Yes,
expectations.
yes.
And I feel like, speaking from personal experience, with the many mistakes that any entrepreneur makes along the journey, a lot of it I feel like does come down to the clarity of communications, not only to your internal team, but to external team, right? Customers. If you don't communicate a clear message in your marketing materials, then people are not going to know what you offer and how you can help them, let alone they're not going to go off and buy what you have to offer. And so what you're saying, of course, completely makes sense and is applicable to many levels of business. And
I had one owner, Dallin, I had one owner that says, a lot of what you're saying is very fundamental. And
mhm.
responded that you're absolutely right. That was the intent. It's not overly complicated. It's meant to be basic, simple, and fundamental, so that it can be transferred from an owner who grasps the concept to the staff. Sometimes there's a system of Six Sigma that was developed, and it was, a lot more sophisticated, but it was for a huge multi-billion-dollar company. And it was a lot more to it because they were making all kinds of airplane parts and things like that. It was designed for that. This strategy is designed for small business, someone that doesn't have, all the various administrative levels in the business to implement a program as sophisticated as Six Sigma. So I mean, it worked well. I mean, it was fantastic. And I think they find that the average owner, small business owner, can grasp this concept of red flagging.
Yeah.
You read about it. We put several examples of things that we did and how it worked. How did we deliver 600,000 products to a studio here in Los Angeles and ship to 257 locations, theater locations, in 7 days? How do you do that and not have a mistake? Well, you have to be able to project ahead and see where you have to get, where are the points that we must make sure that is right, so we don't have to repeat it. Repeat one thing, you missed the ship date. Those are the kind of things we were able to accomplish. And more important than being able to do that is the fact that we didn't have mistakes that cost us money, so we made less profit. And, we've talked about that. Profit is the name of this game. That's how we get to live and grow and do other things in our business. And by delivering, you get to have a satisfied customer that's willing to do business with you again. So it's even though the process is fairly simple, it has a lot of benefit. It is powerful what it can do. We lost, I can't even remember us losing a customer. We imported from China for 20 years and didn't lose any money. The only mistakes that we experienced were actual factory mistakes, like the glue they used didn't have the right chemical mix, so the glue didn't keep the things glued or something like that. There were mistakes, but they weren't our mistakes, and it didn't cost us for those mistakes, other than the fact we disappointed a customer and we had to correct it, so we did have a cost. But things like that, Dallin, sometimes you can do nothing about that. So nothing.
Yeah, certain things you just can't, like.
Yeah. We weren't going to ask them that. We weren't going to ask them to check the glue that they used to put on the product.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's beyond our control. But the fact that we didn't suffer the loss, the customer understood because they know that manufacturing can go that way, and we had a chance to repeat it. And the other thing that we did in our red flag process is, because those goods were goods that we were shipping on a monthly basis, we always had a reserve. That was a flag. What happens if we had an assembly line where product had to arrive for those automobiles on time, so that in that assembly process, our product went inside the car? If our product wasn't there, it went all the way up to the CEO. When the production line was interrupted, it goes to the CEO of the company. Guess what happens to the client relationship when that happens? Okay, it's likely you're not going to have that customer anymore. So that is one of those errors that can be catastrophic, that deserves a red flag, because it meant for us a loss of $2 million a year in revenue. So that hurts for a small business. And so you had to say, well, how do we prevent this from happening? Well, we had reserve products. So even though the glue was not working, we just scrapped that, went in production, made the change. As a matter of fact, the second thing that we did was we had an alternative manufacturer, because that manufacturer could not give us a satisfactory explanation as to why that happened. So we had someone else already tested, waiting in the wings, and started production with them. And we had enough inventory to cover the lag in production of the next thing. That's the red flag process. That's what it does. Projecting ahead and saying, what if, especially when it's important. And if you're talking about clients that you're trying to get to come back and repeat and do business with you, you want to make sure that that beautiful, well-written statement that you make in your proposal, your business plan, is that you can actually execute exactly as you've promised.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And one thing that comes to mind too, in everything you're sharing, is obviously for people to go read your book. But early on, you talked about when you first got started, right? And you had these 2 floors on Wilshire Boulevard, which I know very well. And it's a major boulevard going through Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And to have your business on there, I mean, not only operating expenses from just LA and cost of like running a business, but the fact that you're able to have a life, like a full career with the business established there. What do you feel like early on that you decided to do that made you not part of the category of businesses that fail? So that helped you succeed. What were some of those initial decisions?
Well, I had some business failures in my whole career. But I think that one was a lot of prayer went into my a lot of prayer.
Yeah.
Because I had 2 children at a very young age. I was married when I was still in college, and so that responsibility. I grew up in old-fashioned Virginia, where a guy has to have integrity. You take care of your kids, you take care of your family, and it was a major deal. It's not something that was taken lightly. So I was always pressed to continue to work, to pursue new ideas. And I don't know if other than just having the desire to want to be my best, wanting to experience the joy. I was an athlete in college, and if I can liken it to football, I loved the training for football and track, and I loved the training, and so I trained hard, and that developed the discipline for me to be able to play well. So the business experience was pretty much the same. You prepare, you cover some of the details, and then you persevere with everything you got. And that kind of life experience was what was my driving force to never give up, despite some failures. What was it, when I was about 27 years old, my company that I had was dependent on me selling contracts that we would sell, small contracts for $250, financed over like 18 months or something, 12 months and 18 months. And I sold them to finance companies. Well, we had an economy shift, and the finance companies weren't buying the contracts anymore. So that caused the closure of that business. I had to transition into something else. But fortunately, I had red flagged the possibilities that can happen. So I had plenty of capital to reserve, to transition, to take my time to see what I would do next. So it's just that a life experience of being prepared for things that realistically are beyond your control that can happen, like a financing crunch is beyond my control. Okay, I'm not JP Morgan, and I have no control over that. So when they stopped buying contracts, I wasn't able to sell the contracts. So I was forced to transition then. But the transition wasn't that negative because I had made some preparation.
Yeah. Yeah. So some keywords I hear here: perseverance, preparation,
Yeah.
Probably what was it? Perspiration, maybe.
Yeah.
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 Putting in some of that initial hard
Right.
work, especially.
Uh-huh.
If you would leave, so for other small business owners out there, what do you feel like is like looking back, something that you would share as far as advice or direction as far as next steps beyond, of course, experiencing your book and applying that red flag framework? Well, yeah, what's some direction in words of wisdom that you can share?
Well, there are uh, a lot of things I could comment on. That's a very good question. I mean, there's a lot of things I could I could comment on. I think that an individual, first of all, they're pursuing a business opportunity. If it's a competitive field, and you'd want to develop a differentiator, something that you do that separates you slightly from the competition. Um, there was in the book, I interviewed 6 different business owners from 6 different business categories, and one of them was construction supplies. And he's about a $200 million company, started it from scratch, and built that company. And one of the things he did with differentiator is there were a lot of people in the supply business, but the construction business, he had experience in it. And what he learned was that the construction industry is laden with late everything, late finish dates, late supplies delivered, nothing is done on time in that business. So he had an aha moment. And so before he opened, he developed some key relationships with suppliers, met with suppliers, got really close to his suppliers. This is how I want to do this. And he came into an industry where he could deliver as promised. He would only promise what he could deliver. And it made a difference. And he went from a $15-20 million company, and he's now about a $250 million company. So establishing some kind of a differentiator, I think is very, very important. In our business, the way we differentiated ourselves from 2,500 other distributors, I mean, it's laden with competitors, this business of brand marketing, is we did not sell clients products for service. We sold them ideas that were designed to get a particular result that they wanted. If you want your customers to be able to call you at a certain time, and you want to make sure that they have your information, we always presented everything as an idea. Here's a business idea that will help you achieve the goal, as opposed to here's a product. And there are other companies that did that, but the majority didn't. You don't have to be the only one with the differentiator. You just have to separate yourself from the masses so that it's down between you and maybe a few other competitors that do what you do.
Yeah. So making yourself sound different, be different,
Yeah.
and getting that attention in the right way that way.
Yeah.
So it sounds
Yeah.
like, to me, a big part of that comes down to your messaging, right? What you put out there for people to understand more about what you do and why.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think this has been so impactful, Walter. I thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Definitely, we'll share the details to access to your book and more information about you in
Okay.
the description down below. And we look forward to connecting further. So thank you so much, Walter, and we'll talk soon.
You're welcome, Dallin. Have a good day.